Hello and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got some news coming out here for you. We're going to be talking about this whole Ukraine war, and I've been talking a lot about this topic lately of Ukraine being unable to strike back inside of Russia using US supplied weapons. Okay, so we've got some stories coming out here of US lawmakers that are urging the Pentagon right now to allow Ukraine to basically strike inside of Russia with US supplied weapons. Now, as far as we know, Congress is willing to allow Ukraine to strike targets inside of Russia, but the Biden administration, the top heads of the US government, are the ones that are not okay with it. Okay, they're trying to prevent escalation or whatever their agenda might be. They don't exactly want Ukraine, at least not as of right now, to strike inside of Russian territory. Now, the reason why Ukraine wants to strike inside of Russian territory is because what Russia's doing is they're setting up shop with all their artillery and their rockets and whatever they might want to use to strike inside of Ukraine, and they set up right along the border of Russia and Ukraine, excuse me, and they know that Ukraine cannot fire into Russia using the ATACMS missiles or whatever weaponry they're being given, right? So they know that they can't target them across the border, and that's why Russia's just able to set up, hundreds of rocket systems and missile launchers, whatever they want to use, and strike inside of Ukraine, and Ukraine basically can't do anything about it. All they can really do is defend themselves using air defense, which they're already short on that as well. They've claimed also many times that they need more Patriot systems. These are air defense systems that are very capable of shooting down multiple drones or missiles that are coming into Ukraine. So we have a video that we're going to be showing you, actually a couple videos, regarding this gentleman that you see here in the photo. This is Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul. Okay, so he's going to be talking to Secretary of State Antony Blinken here in a video in just a moment regarding this whole situation and trying to push for the Biden administration to allow Ukraine to strike targets inside of Russia. But before we get into that and show you these videos, I want to show you this first. Just a quick article to go over here. So that from the Kiev Independent, this coming out today, U.S. lawmakers urge Pentagon to permit Ukraine's use of U.S. supplied weapons to strike targets inside Russia. So it says here, a bipartisan group of U.S. members of Congress wrote a letter to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on May 20th, urging the Pentagon to permit Ukraine to strike Russian territory with U.S. supplied weapons. U.S. officials have repeatedly said that they do not support or encourage Kyiv strikes with American weapons deep inside Russia, while Ukrainian officials are reportedly trying to convince Washington to lift this ban. Ukraine recently said that Washington's ban meant Ukraine was unable to attack Russian forces as they were building up before crossing the border into Kharkiv Oblast in the renewed Russian offensive that began earlier in May. The letter, which was signed by Congressman Mike Turner, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, and 12 other representatives from both parties, asked the Pentagon to allow Ukraine to use certain weapons provided by the U.S. to conduct operations on strategic targets inside Russian and Russian-controlled territory. Ukrainians have been unable to defend themselves due to the Biden administration's current policy. It is essential the Biden administration allows Ukraine's military leaders an ability to conduct a full spectrum of operations necessary to respond to Russia's unprovoked attack on their sovereign land, the letter continued. The sentiment was recently echoed by Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielis Landsbergis, who said that the U.S. restriction on using long-range ATACMS missiles inside Russia was a mistake. The representatives also requested that the U.S. help train more Ukrainian pilots on F-16 fighter jets and provide more air defense, namely upwards of 7 additional Patriot batteries. President Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier in May that Ukraine could prevent the occupation of Kharkiv with just 2 more Patriot batteries. So that's something that Volodymyr Zelensky's been asking for, obviously. More Patriot batteries and missile systems to shoot down these incoming drones and missile attacks that are coming from the Russians just literally over their border, okay? That, like I said, they're lining up on the border and they are attacking targets inside of Ukraine very easily, and they know that they cannot be attacked as well. So they're abusing this policy basically by the Biden administration by setting up shop right on the border of Ukraine and just launching attacks into Ukraine, knowing that the Ukrainians cannot fire back. So We're going to go over this video now. It's about 1 minute and 49 seconds long, and it's going to be Chairman McCall here talking to Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, trying to convince him to allow Ukraine to strike targets inside of Russian territory. Let's take a look.
Ukraine. We have a really bad situation going on, as you know. This is a sanctuary zone that the Russians have created. And what they're doing is they're lining up all their artillery and rockets and missiles just across the Ukraine border that they then use to attack the Ukrainians. However, your administration and Jake Sullivan have restricted the arms use so that Ukraine cannot defend itself and fire back at Russia. That's why I mandated the ATACMS and the supplemental, the long range, short range, and the HIMARS, that your administration is tying their hands behind their back, not unlike what you're trying to do in Israel. Will you change this policy so Ukraine can fight without one hand tied behind its back?
Well, as you know, we've rallied 50 countries over the last 2 years to come to Ukraine's defense, to provide it with the weapons it needs to defend itself, to push back against Russian aggression. When it comes to enabling, endorsing attacks outside of Ukraine, that's not something we've done, but Ukraine will have to make and will make its own decisions, and I want to make sure it gets the equipment that it needs to effectively defend itself.
Congress got them the equipment, and thank you for implementing that, but Congress did not put restrictions on the use of these weapons. It's Jake Sullivan and your administration that has put the restrictions on these weapons, and I talked to them, and this is not, they cannot achieve victory with these restrictions that you, not the Congress, have placed on them. And I hope you'll take that back to the National Security Advisor and the National Security Council and change this policy decision that is very dangerous and damaging to the Ukrainian people.
Okay, so that should give you a good understanding here of how important it is for Ukraine to be able to strike targets inside of Russian territory. But at the same time, I think what the Biden administration is trying to do is avoid a situation of escalation where Russia now says, hey, you're now striking our territory with U.S. supplied weapons. Now this is the U.S. targeting Russia directly. And obviously, I just reported, what was it, just yesterday, Russia is doing tactical nuclear weapons drills, okay? They're preparing for war with NATO and also nuclear war, okay? So this is obviously a very difficult decision to make. I think regardless of how you feel about it, it's a very difficult decision to make. Yes, I do think that Ukraine should be able to strike inside of Russia, but at the same time, could that cause more escalation? Could that cause a wider reaction from Russia and push us closer to inevitable conflict with NATO? At the end of the day, I feel like this situation is just really bad, okay? It's extremely bad, and there's just going to be no good outcome really from this unless one side eventually decides to call for some sort of peace truce or deal or something. That's the only way I really see out of this. Aside from that, it's just going to be more escalation and more escalation until the point where, we have basically a worldwide war. So one thing I want to show you as well, I've got another video here from Mr. McCall as well. Okay, this was from back in April, I believe, and he was talking about this whole war in Ukraine, and he's bringing up some other points here that I think are very important to understand. So let's listen to this 1 minute and 25-second clip, and then we'll talk about this as well.
Thank y'all for your testimony.
I would say 80%, though, of the money for Ukraine does go into our defense industrial base, and it goes into modernizing and replenishing our stockpiles in the United States, and it's going to create jobs in the United States. Any expert you talk to, every military, General Jack Keane to Mike Pompeo, will tell you there's a national security interest here, because if Ukraine falls, then Moldova is going to fall, then Georgia, then the Baltics are at stake, and you're looking at parallels to 1939 all over again. And then eventually they're going to hit a chord with the NATO Article 5, and we're going to have to send our men and women over there. And the reason I want this, they're fighting for us is what they tell me. And I want to give them everything they need to at least push the Russians back so we don't have to send our men and women over there. It's called deterrence. If we fail on that and surrender in Ukraine like we did in Afghanistan, does that make the United States, does that make it more powerful or weaker? It makes us weaker. as we're not projecting strength, and we lose the trust and confidence of our allies. I think that's a big mistake, and it would have a long-term generational impact. I don't want our men and women over there. And if we do nothing, that's going to happen.
Okay, so obviously, as you can see here, he definitely stands with Ukraine. He wants Ukraine to win, and he doesn't want them to lose this fight. And he's obviously bringing up some very major points here that if Ukraine isn't given the weaponry that they need, which ties into the first video that I showed you regarding allowing Ukraine to strike inside of Russia, that at some point it's going to push us closer to NATO getting involved in this war, especially if Ukraine loses. So clearly, Mr. McCall here definitely wants Ukraine to win, does not want them to lose, and I see his points here that when he's talking about national security and things like that, when it comes to the United States and also Western partners, that it's a very dangerous situation, and that's why I say here there really is just going to be no good outcome here. I just don't see Russia backing down. I don't see them just walking away from this conflict. They've invested way too much into this, and I don't see a position where any side is really just going to give up. I see all hands on deck here, and it's very dangerous. Okay, we're at a very dangerous point in history, and I feel like we're at the calmest point that we could possibly be at because the war is ongoing. When it comes to the point when the war is no longer ongoing, and then we hit a major, like a crash into a wall, basically, that's when there's going to be some form of major reaction and maybe some desperate maneuvers from either side, whether that be from Russia or Ukraine. So finally, I want to show you guys a clip real quick as well of Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Basically, he came out today and was supportive of this decision of allowing Ukraine to strike targets inside of Russian territory. So let's go ahead and take a look at this as well.
Mr. Speaker, could I ask a quick question? Your colleagues from House Intelligence Committee, they just released a statement in which they're calling for administration to allow Ukraine to use American weaponry on the military targets on Russian territory. Would you support that? Because right now they have weapons, but they have restrictions to use that.
I think we need to allow Ukraine to prosecute the war and the way they see fit. They need to be able to fight back, and I think us trying to micromanage the effort there is not good policy for us. So
Did Leader Schumer respond to your deadline yesterday?
Mr. Speaker, could I ask a quick question?
Okay, so definitely this is big talk right now when it comes to allowing Ukraine to strike inside Russian territory. Now we're hearing it here from Speaker of the House Mike Johnson stating that he's basically supporting the fact that Ukraine should be able to strike inside of Russian territory and do what they feel is fit to defend their country. Because clearly, right now, they cannot fully defend themselves. They can only defend themselves the minute that Russia crosses the border. Once they cross the border, then they have the right to strike at Russian targets. But that only goes so far, and it allows Russia to move into their country before they can even target them. And then it allows Russia to have the advantage to potentially take more land. So this is obviously a very big issue here. And I really don't know how they're going to resolve this, but allowing Ukraine to strike inside of Russia is going to create even worse escalation than what we're seeing now. And I think this is what a lot of these tactical nuclear drills that Russia's doing right now, I think this has a lot to do with it, because we're hearing lots and lots of talk coming out right now where Congress is trying to push for the Biden administration to finally allow Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles or whatever they're being given, long-range attack missiles, to strike targets inside of Russian territory. So yeah, I just wanted to show you this and let you know what's going on here. This is not being widely talked about to the extreme, but in my opinion, this is a pretty big story, and that's why I wanted to cover it. So let me know what you think about this down below. Should Ukraine be allowed to strike targets inside of Russian territory, or do you think they should refrain and just to defend their own territory, considering the fact that they've been under attack for over 2 years now? Okay, so share your thoughts and concerns and opinions down in the comment section. That's going to be it for this update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. And also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, I hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.